decided that's what I would do. Also, just quick note, in case you're wondering why I'm always wearing a headband in my videos, I recently had bangs cut and I don't like them. It's not that I don't actually like the bangs. I don't like them with this length of hair. I have always loved having bangs when I had long hair, but I can't seem to make them work with this length of hair. And I really need to put an effort into like blow dry them and style them in a way that I like them, but I'm just too lazy to do it at the moment. Like wet my bangs every morning and blow dry them and then try to style them. Well, I might at some point do it and think it looks great and then just keep it. But at the moment, every morning I pin them back and then I put a headband over them whenever I have like a Zoom call or I need to go out or I'm recording a video, because just the pin back looks terrible. But I have a pretty wide head and every headband ultimately pinches my temples and gives me a headache, so I can't wear it all day. I only wear it when I have to, and as soon as I know people can't see me anymore, I take it off. So, yes, you might be seeing them quite a lot in the foreseeable future because I just don't know what to do. Growing bangs out takes a really long time, and I always know when I get them cut, it's a risk that I may hate them. I've loved them in the past, and I've hated them in the past. I also just really think it depends on how they're cut, and love my hairdresser, but I don't think she cut them exactly how I asked her to, so whatever. On to the video. I took some notes on my phone because I want to preface this by saying that I don't think I am as shocked by a lot of the things that happened as either younger people than me would be, or people who started watching the show during COVID times. I watched the show as it aired, and I binge watched long before streaming services were available. I DVR'd it. Does anyone remember the DVR? I'm sure a lot of you don't. I remember the DVR. I DVR'd the show, and then I would just binge watch it many times. I've watched every cycle many times, except for the later ones. I did watch all of them. I think I watched the ones that Rita Ora presented, and then I watched the one that Tyra came back for, but I'm not entirely sure that I watched the last one. The last one I watched is the one that Niall DeMarco won. I think there might have been one after that I wasn't completely aware of, and then ended up not watching. I should have Googled that. I Googled quite a bit to get my facts straight, but I forgot about that, so let me know if you are aware of a season after Niall DeMarco's that I probably didn't watch. And those later seasons I watched probably only once. But the earlier seasons from like 1 until probably 16, I think I watched like all of them 5 or 6 times. And cycle 13, which is my favorite, it's the petite model cycle, I probably watched that like a dozen times. So I've watched this show a lot, and because I watched it at the time it aired, I wasn't really shocked by anything at that time because we didn't know any better. That is genuinely these things, it was a different time, is a valid excuse. I don't think it is for everything, and I will get into all of that towards the end of the video. But it just was. But there were some things in it that truly shocked me. Now, for those of you who want me to give a recap, it's kind of hard. But what I first want to clear up some, like the rumor that's been swirling around a lot online, or it's not really a rumor, people take it as fact, that Tyra produced this documentary. That's not true. She's not a producer. She had no creative involvement in this. I watched an interview with Jay Manuel on Entertainment Tonight, on Instagram, I think, today, about the whole process, and he explained that they were approached over the last few years by at least 2 major networks every year to do a documentary on this show. He said, but I always felt like what they wanted to do was just tear it down. He said, and I didn't want that. I didn't think the show deserved that, and I didn't want Tyra to be vilified. I will also get into their relationship towards the end of the video, but because they're not friends anymore, but I think he still has a lot of special sort of feelings towards her. Fair enough. She was important. She was an important person to him at some time in his life. But anyway, that aside, he always said no because he didn't want that to be the case. And when he was approached by Netflix, he initially also said, "What is your intention?" And it was kind of leading into, the drama of the show. And he was like, if that's what it's going to be, then it's a no. But let's have tea and talk about it. He said, and that tea session turned into like 3 hours. And I felt like they truly wanted to have a talk with all of us and listen to our side of the story in a very neutral way. And Tyra, this was like in 2024, and Tyra didn't know this documentary was going to be made. They actually didn't ask her to be in it until later in 2025 because they didn't think she'd say yes. And Jay said they made it very clear to me that they were going to go ahead with this documentary with or without Tyra. So it was not about vilifying or lifting up Tyra. It was about being neutral. And he said they then told me who the 2 producers were going to be, who I never heard of, but apparently they're 2 very famous producers for Netflix documentaries. They have great journalistic integrity, and he was a big fan of theirs because he's a complete documentary geek. And so when he knew it was going to be them, he trusted that it was genuinely going to be a neutral documentary, and he was on board. And that's the best way I can describe the documentary. It's very neutral, and that's kind of what Netflix documentaries generally are. I remember, they make documentaries that if you already have an opinion going into it, you don't come out of it with a different opinion. I had that very much with the Amanda Knox documentary. I am personally someone who's always believed that she was innocent. And I truly believe that with her, you're not in the middle. You're either team innocent or team guilty. So if you're team guilty, I'm sure you have your reasons. I have my reasons for believing she's innocent. But that documentary was very much, I don't know if they interviewed Meredith's family. I think they did, but they definitely interviewed the police officer who truly believes she's guilty, and he gave all his reasons and all his evidence. And then they interviewed Amanda, who says she's innocent, and she gave all her reasons and all her evidence. And at the end of it, I wasn't swayed in any other direction. I kind of like that. I do think with America's Next Top Model, they could have gone a little bit more into the drama, but I just don't think that was their intention. That said, there are other documentaries coming out that will do that, and I am a little bit worried about watching them because I think they will completely vilify the show, and that it's all going to be told from one side, and I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that. But the best word I can use to describe this documentary is beige. It was an interesting watch, but I think it could have been 6 episodes instead of 3. I think they sometimes started delving a little bit into drama and then stopped without us really knowing more, and I'll give an example of that later. But let me start with my talking points before I forget them, and then I'll probably turn this into a ramble that's completely unhinged and nowhere near cohesive. Okay, the first topic I want to talk about is Shandy. This is probably the only part that genuinely shocked me. So, Shandy, I don't, even if you did watch the show, you may not remember everything about it. Shandy was a model on season 2. And when the show took them on a trip to Rome, Milan or Rome, Italy, whatever, I'll just say Italy. I found this interesting. Okay, someone said, what if we invite the guys over? So they had to go on go-sees in Italy, and they had male models that drove them around, each of the girls on a Vespa, to their respective go-see each time. And someone said in the evening, what if we invite the guys, the male models, over for a few drinks tonight? Now, Jay said in his interview with E that he knows exactly who said that, but he won't say the name. But it was someone, it was a producer. I remember it, and I think they even showed that in the clip. One of the other models said it, but they were told to say it by a producer. So they came over. Shandy got really drunk and ended up sleeping with one of the male models. And I just use that term because I don't want YouTube to demonetize me. And I'm also telling you what we saw happened in the episode, not the documentary yet. Now, what actually appeared to have happened is that all of it was filmed. They apparently first did it in the shower, which I didn't know because I'm pretty sure that wasn't aired, and then in her bed. And they filmed everything, and they were planning to air everything. But this happened around the same time as the nip slip from Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake at the Super Bowl. And networks were very selective about what they would show. So Ken Mock, the executive producer, kind of showrunner, decider of most of the storylines, said they had to do a lot of last-minute editing of that episode to really only show a very small part of what happened and what it looked like happened. And what I believed for all these years is that so they gave her a phone. Magically, it appeared out of nowhere. And again, filmed the whole thing. She said that she was in a room with one cameraman and one sound guy who filmed her in fetal position on the floor, crying, talking to her boyfriend. And when it was all over, they came up to her and said, "We're really sorry. We had to film that." And then left. They didn't want to, but they were told to. Now, she said that she was so drunk, she actually blacked out. She doesn't really remember having it with that guy, but she knows she did. She said, I didn't feel it. I knew it was happening, but then I blacked out. And if there's anything I've learned from Law & Order SVU, which by the way was on the air when that season aired, is that if a woman is too drunk to say yes or no, she can't give consent. And it is SA. And actually worse, it is, but I can't abbreviate that. And I hope you all know what I mean with SA. I can't say the words in full or YouTube will demonetize me. But I didn't know that because that's not what we were shown. And I don't even really know if Shandy knew that until years later. I think it may have only become apparent to her until a few years ago that that's actually what happened to her. She was SA'd, and the absolute shocker of that was that there were so many cameramen and producers around and nobody did anything to stop it. And Ken Mock's explanation was, we treated this reality series like a documentary, and the girls knew that when they signed up for it. We told them that everything they did and said would be filmed. They wouldn't be allowed to go anywhere alone except for the bathroom. But because she wasn't alone in the bathroom, they were allowed to film it. So that was his excuse. And I'm like, so you still think this was consensual and then it was okay? It was not, and it was clear that it was not. I also still question, and I always questioned this even if it had been consensual, why none of the other girls stopped her. You know, you create a bond over this sort of reality competition. You spend a lot of time in the same living quarters. You develop a friendship. You know your friend is in a committed relationship. She talked about her boyfriend a lot. You know she's really drunk. This is the point where you pull her away and say, okay, it's enough. Guys, go home. We need to put her to bed. I don't know if the producers forbade them from intervening. None of the other girls took part in this documentary, but they also haven't made a statement as of me filming this, which is Thursday. 4 days after the documentary aired. Oh, sorry, it's Friday today. 5 days after the documentary aired. They haven't made a statement on social media yet either about this. So, I don't know whether they were told not to or why they didn't. And, by the way, production intervening, I don't think she needed to be stopped because she was way too drunk to realize what was going on. They needed to stop him. They needed to say to those boys, okay, it's time to go home. We need to put this girl to bed. But no, they let this play out. And that, for me to find out that it was actually SA and not consensual, that was a big shock to me because that's never what we were shown. And what bothered me the most, what bothered me the most about this was what happened, but what really bothered me is that when they asked Tyra about the Shandy incident, they asked her, do you remember the Shandy incident? And she went, say, I vaguely remember. And she essentially said, I vaguely remember the story. And I was like, are you kidding me? And her excuse was, I was not involved with production. Hello, you were the executive producer on that show. The entirety of the show from Cycle 1. She also goes on later to say that she became a master editor thanks to Ken because he taught her a lot about editing. She was in the production room, and Jay again said in that interview that he was in the production room watching the footage with Tyra. He had gotten a call from someone on set saying that Shandy was having with a guy in the apartment, and Jay was like, what? So he ran over, and both him and Tyra were in the production room watching it and watching all the footage that had been shot before. So Tyra knew exactly what was going on. It's raining, sorry. I hope it suits you rather than annoys you. Can't stop it. But anyway, so and this is kind of the thing throughout the documentary, when she gets praise, she was the executive producer. When she gets called out on something negative, production wasn't her area. And she often also said, I didn't come up with the storylines. And Jay said, you better believe she didn't let anyone else come up with the storylines, because that show was hers and she wanted to control the narrative of that show completely. So that, to me, and they started with this documentary starts with the Shandy story, that already kind of set the tone for me of, oh my god, she's gonna just deny everything, isn't she? Like, this is not, I was really shocked by that. Now, luckily, none of the other things that happened really shocked me, but the Shandy one really did. My heart breaks for her. I feel like she still has a lot of trauma from that, and I do believe she went to therapy. I think she may have even said she did, but I think you can tell that she still has trauma from that. I kind of think that Tyra didn't want to admit she remembered the story because she might be worried that there could be legal repercussions. I wonder if Shandy still has a case to take this to court. Not necessarily for the model, but for the show, for production, for not stopping this, for kind of orchestrating this and not stopping it. I don't know the statute of limitations on SA. I believe there is one, but I don't know if there is one in Italy. That's where this happened. So, but I don't know if she would want to drag all this up again. But I wonder if that's why Tyra didn't want to own up to it, because she doesn't want to implicate herself legally. But she didn't own up to a lot of things, so let's just say that. Then the next one is Kenya. I'll first talk about the male model situation because it ties kind of into the one. The Shandy story was nowhere near as bad, but she had a photo shoot with a male model that was very, very interested in her. He spent the whole time they were getting ready wanting to be near her, asking if he could give her a massage, wanting to get her phone number. And when they were doing the photo shoot, they were supposed to do like an African dance type of thing, and the models, 3 of them, were supposed to dance behind the girl. models, and this model kept grinding up against her. The photo, this is the kicker of it, the photo they actually chose at judging shows him physically having his hand on her thigh. And yet, they told her to get over it. She stopped the photo shoot and expressed to everyone and said that she was uncomfortable with the moaning and the groaning and the touching of her. And could he please keep his distance? And everyone, including Jay, because let's be clear here, I love Jay, but Jay, while he takes accountability for a lot of things, is not all that innocent in this either. They all said, we're all on our time here, we're all on the clock here, we all want to get this day over with, just suck it up and continue with it. Not everyone gets to do things they always want to do, just do it. And about that, Tyra actually said, I want to apologize to Kenya because I should have protected her more. But I could only work with with the information I was given. If I had known that had happened, I would have tried to protect her. And I was like, again, executive producer, you saw all the footage, and she told you at judging what happened, and you said it pretty much the same thing. That's the fashion industry. Models sometimes are made uncomfortable by male models. You just have to get through it. So she did I think it's the only time in the documentary that she apologized for anything, and she apologized to Kenya via the documentary, not in person, for that one incident. But then most of Kenya's story was about her body shaming. I remember this season, also this was season 4, I remember this season very well, where she gained about 10 pounds throughout the season. Now she was part of the, being interviewed. She said that her whole life she had been a stick figure, and she had always been made fun of for being so skinny. So she started the season really skinny, and her gaining 10 pounds really wasn't that bad, but they kept shooting her, or showing her, not even just shooting, showing her when she was walking around from such bad angles that it looked like she had a huge gut that was hanging over her shorts. And she kept getting comments about, we had to do a lot of retouching on your photo, and if you're a model of my stature, they would happily do that, but if you're a new model, they're not going to invest that much in retouching, and you need to make smarter decisions with your food. Like Tyra actually used the sentence, you can have a burger and take the bread and take the bun off, just be careful with what you eat. And it was so it was just, Kenya was, I feel, body shamed probably the most throughout the series. Now, the reason this shocks me, and I'm going to tie this in with Ebony. Ebony was one of only 2 black models on season 1. The other one was Robin, but they didn't really talk about her. They showed her once, saying she was uncomfortable that Ebony was bringing her girlfriend over because she doesn't like being around lesbians. Robin was a very religious woman. Never liked her. But that's the only time they showed her, like a clip of her. They did kind of made it sound like Cycle 1 only had 1 black model, but it had 2. That does not make it better. shamed, let's be honest. They would never say this about a white model, that your skin is too bumpy. They only said this about a black model. Is it more obvious on black skin? I don't actually know. I don't think that was the point. The point was diversity. And this leads me into the topic I'm trying to talk about, changing the industry. And they really just vilified her and skin shamed her. It's the best way I can describe it. But this is how the documentary really started, by Tyra saying, I wanted to make a show about models so I could change the perception of the fashion industry. She wanted more, as a struggling black model herself. She wanted more black models to break through. She wanted more plus size models to break through. She wanted to break that stigma of you have to be stick thin, and of there only being white supermodels. Like, it was, I think at that time it was her, Naomi Campbell, and Iman. I think Iman is older, so she's probably the first. But that was it. There were a lot of white top models and like 3 black. So, it wasn't that. And again, this is where I come back to, it was a different time, but that is not where that excuse goes. But anyway, she said that that's why she created it. And now Eva, who won season 3 as a black short model, I think she was 5'7", which was sort of the limit the fashion industry would go with. I believe Kate Moss was also 5'7", and she was sort of the smallest supermodel there was at the time. She said that she truly believes that was Tyra's intention when she started the show, but she realized it wasn't going to be possible to do. But I felt it was pretty obvious from season 1 that that wasn't her intention, because you don't skin shame and body shame models from the get-go if you're trying to change the industry, because in season 2 she regularly a few times body shamed Joanna, the eventual winner, who lost a lot of weight recently and had some extra fat hanging over her pants every now and then, which is normal when you lose a lot of weight. But she was a really skinny model, and Tyra called her out sometimes on that extra fat, and I was like, that wasn't shown in the documentary, but that all happened. So the idea of her making this to change the industry, I think, is BS. She made this to have a reality show about models, which was never done before, and it was very popular when they released it. And it was all about creating as much drama as possible. And I'll give you 2 examples that for me exemplify that. Whitney was, to my knowledge, the only plus size winner of America's Next Top Model, and that was in cycle 10, which was 2008. The show started in 2002, and they did 2 cycles per year. So, but I did Google this because I'm not sure when they started doing 2 cycles per year. Was season 2 already in 2002 or in 2003? I wanted to get the timing right, so cycle 10 was in 2008. And she Whitney was a plus size model that won. Now, she said that the agency she signed with in that first year, which was part of her prize win, didn't even have a plus size division. And she wasn't sent out on go-sees nearly as much as the other girls. I believe, and I'm sorry if I got this wrong because I watched the was said about Whitney or if it was said about Danielle. This was said about Danielle. But I think Whitney said that in that first year, she didn't book a single job because no one in the industry, no client, was looking for a plus size model. So for Tyra, it was a facade of, look at me, trying to change the industry. I let a plus size model win, knowing full well that girl wasn't gonna book any jobs. And the same goes, in my opinion, for cycle 13, which is my favorite cycle. I've watched it a million times. It's the petite girls cycle. The tallest you could be was 5'7", which at that time had been accepted in the industry for a while. Again, Kate Moss, I believe, was 5'7", and Eva won season 3 at 5'7". There were several girls that were like 5'3", 5'4", who won the season. The girl that was 5'7". Now, don't get me wrong, Nicole is one of my favorite winners. She thoroughly deserved her win. She was a weirdo, which I automatically gravitate to because I'm a weirdo, so I was like, she's already my favorite from the beginning. But she blossomed during that season. She became, I almost want to say normal, which is not the word I want to use, but she just acted like she just became really social, and she won the Go See challenge, which a lot of the other girls really didn't get. But she really, made an effort to make some friends. She did. She was really good friends actually with Brittany. And in her life, she couldn't really make friends, so she learned a lot of social skills on that show. She just she was a different person towards the end of it. And she took beautiful photos, literally from start to finish. She never faltered. And I love her as a winner. But she was the tallest of all of them, because Laura, who was runner-up, was 5'6". I don't remember if any of the girls were also 5'7", might have been, but there weren't a lot. And the girl who was 5'7" won, which again is a facade for Tyra to say, look, I'm changing the industry. I let a petite girl win. And I'm like, no, the 5'7" girl won, which was already an acceptable minimum height in the industry for many years. So that didn't change the industry either. Because the smallest girl in that cycle, Sunday, was 5'3", and I believe she got a comment during one of her go-sees from a client that they would never book a girl that small. She was like, I think the prerequisites for applicants to that season were between 5'3" and 5'7", but no one in the fashion industry was gonna hire a girl that was 5'3", and I'm pretty sure Tyra knew that. So yeah, changing the industry I don't think was ever her intention, and accepted because she got into a bar fight during the auditions, and they sent her to, and Jay confirmed this, so kudos actually to the show for doing this. They sent her to anger management classes so that she could come back next season and have, no anger management issues anymore. So she said, we tried to help her so much because we saw so much potential in her, and I saw that angry black woman of me in the past in her, and so when it was an accumulation of all those things on my shoulders, and then seeing her take this as a joke, that made me snap. And I thought, really? Because right after this happened, I remember you giving an interview. Not you, sorry. I remember. Yes, no, Tyra. But it was like Tyra, Nigel, and Jay. They all spoke on it because everyone was asking them about what happened during this episode. They all said that she had been overworked, sleep deprived, and really stressed, and that it was an accumulation of that just made her snap. And I'm like, what's more likely? The answer you gave right after it happened, when you would remember, or the answer you're giving 20 years later when you wouldn't really remember how you were feeling in that moment? It's a very good answer to give because it makes you look like the victim. When in reality, if it was an accumulation of being overworked and stressed, hey, I've been there. I nearly threw a chair through my kitchen window because I dropped a fork on the floor. When I was really stressed, I get anger outbursts. I get it. But own up to it. Don't make up some excuse to make yourself look better. Now I want to talk about some of the things that I wasn't as shocked by as a lot of other people were. One of them was the photo shoot where one of the models, in particular Amanda, but I don't know if everyone remembers her. She was one of the twins. It wasn't Amanda, it was the other twin, Michelle. She had to portray a model who had bulimia. And people online are like, I can't believe they did an eating disorder photo shoot. And I'm like, okay, you clearly didn't watch the episode. And I think this is the problem with a lot of these reactions or reaction channels. They go based off what the documentary showed, but not based off what actually happened on the show. So watch the show before you actually form an opinion. They showed that photo shoot of Michelle portraying bulimia, I think at least 3 times in the documentary, and without giving context, I'm like, that the theme of that photo shoot was model stereotypes. So yes, they showed bulimia, anorexia, an alcoholic, but they also showed a dumb blonde, a man-eater, I don't know, something like a poor and struggling model, a rich model. They showed a lot of different stereotypes, or at least what Tyra felt were stereotypes of models. Now, in hindsight, this is not one of those situations where you can use the excuse it was a different time. You shouldn't have portrayed anyone with an eating disorder. There are plenty of model stereotypes. You could have taken those out and swapped them out for a different one. But I just want to highlight that that whole photo shoot was not about eating disorders. There were 2 photo ops that displayed an eating disorder. It was a model stereotype theme, so take it in context before you comment on it. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a model stereotype theme. Just take out the eating disorder type. said on Instagram afterwards that she wants to clarify that her mom was not shot in the head. And it wasn't at the time. She didn't find it triggering. Now looking back on it, she thinks it probably wasn't a coincidence, neither do I, but she didn't really think about that in the moment, and she didn't think it was offensive in any way. And a lot of these things are like creative photo shoots, and like the runways with the swinging pendulum where girls had to try and avoid them, and then the runway with in the plastic ball with water all around it, where some girls then fell in the water and had to try and get out, get their plastic ball back on the runway. Oh, I laughed so hard at that one that aired. Like, these are all things that are entertaining. I don't know why people are in uproar about those things. Even today, I don't think that's a big deal. People were like, they used tarantulas. Yeah, they were trying to sell jewelry. It was a jewelry ad where they had like their hands on their face with a tarantula. Would I enjoy that? No, it would creep me the fuck out. But it's not. Those kind of ads are still out there today. Maybe now they put the tarantula in with CGI, but they didn't have that method back then. I truly don't believe there was ever a photo shoot or a one-way where the models' lives were in danger. The elephant photo shoot, there was a trainer of the elephant there at all times. As soon as the elephant started moving, the model was told what to do, which was essentially sit still and grab on to the sides of the elephant. And the trainer would immediately calm the elephant down and stop him from moving. I rode an elephant as a kid at a petting zoo. Not by choice, I didn't want to do it. My parents were like, go, go. And I was like, oh my god. We were like 5 kids at the same time sitting on top of an elephant. It smelled terrible. And I don't think it's right to ride an elephant, by the way. Although, in Africa they do, in some parts of Africa, that's genuinely their method of transportation. So, to get through the jungle. I don't think, if you're being honest, you're not going to watch a reality show where every photo shoot is a beauty shot and every runway is simply walking down a catwalk modeling an outfit. You want some creativity, and I think all the photo shoots were creative, and I think most of the runways were creative. The pendulum runway, I remember a few girls got hit. I think only one fell off, but I don't think the pendulums were made out of pure metal, and there were padded, those like gym mats all along the runway, so the girls didn't actually get hurt when they got hit by one of the pendulums. It was never a dangerous situation, and I don't know why people are so in uproar about these things, because it was a different time. They would still do these things today. Now, where I do want to say it was a different time is a valid excuse is things like, and I know this is going to be controversial for some people, but the race swapping photo shoot. Tyra being a black woman, I thought there was nothing wrong with it because she was black. She was doing it to celebrate black women. And again, it was a different time. The whole body shaming thing, that really was the industry. The fashion industry and the entertainment industry were obsessed with skinny women. This was at the height of Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie's popularity and Britney Spears, and like just skinny actress, you didn't work. If you were black, one of you would probably be the diversity hire and the rest of you wouldn't work. Is that okay? No. But that was the times back then. Nobody knew any better. It was generally accepted that that's the way it was, except obviously by those people that were affected by it. But that is the way it was everywhere, and everyone just accepted it because we didn't know any better. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't apologize for it now. And that's what she didn't do. She went as far as to say hindsight is 20/20 for everyone. It just so happens that my hindsight happened for everyone to see. You could say, I didn't think it. She addressed the race swapping shoot as her wanting to do, celebrate black women. She said, and now people are like, what were you doing? Are you crazy? She said, but hindsight is 20/20, and it just so happened that my hindsight happened in front of everyone. And I'm like, yeah, okay, looking back at that photo shoot, and by the way, she did it twice, I cringe. And I think, oh my God, that was so wrong. You could now say, yes, it was a different time, but it shouldn't have been acceptable. And I apologize for doing it now. And I will even say that. I apologize for thinking it was acceptable because it was a different time and I didn't know any better. And that's genuinely true. That doesn't mean that I don't cringe thinking back at the time that I thought that was acceptable. And I can apologize for that now and say I'm truly sorry that I wasn't more shocked at that at the time. But she, as the person who came up with those things, didn't. And that is really what I take most from this documentary, is that a lot of things can be excused, in my opinion, by saying it was a different time. Guys, we're talking 25 years ago. It just was. Okay, we weren't woke. Woke wasn't a word that existed. But that doesn't mean you can't take accountability and apologize for things that happened then, today. I don't believe anyone should get canceled for things they did 20 to 25 years ago, as long as they own up to it and apologize and say, yeah, it wasn't a big deal back then, but I know it shouldn't have been acceptable, and truly apologize for hurting anyone. And she didn't do that. She gave very much the I'm sorry you were offended kind of apology. And that is Tyra. And she always has this smile on her face that to me seems very fake. And I don't doesn't think she needs to. Jay said something similar, but Jay's an interesting situation. So Jay wanted to quit after season 8. In the documentary, he states that he sent her an email and that a person he used to speak to 3 times a day took 3 days to respond with a 3-word response: I am disappointed. And he said after that, she stopped talking to him. And they were, but what wasn't shown in the documentary, like, my first thought was, you said before that you and Tyra were such good friends. Like, she always stayed at your apartment when she was in New York. You stayed at her apartment when you were in LA. She relied on you for a lot of decisions made in America's Next Top Model. Why would you send her an email? But what wasn't shown in the documentary, and he said this in the interview, is she was traveling at the time and I couldn't get a hold of her on the phone. So I decided to send her an email. And they screen tested several people to replace me. And they couldn't. And then the network had called my lawyer to urgently get a hold of me. And my lawyer called me and said, could you, as a favor to them, do cycle 9? Because they can't find anyone else. And it's due to start filming in 2 weeks' time. Now, he said at the time I had committed to another project. I was due to start filming another TV show, so I couldn't. And my lawyer told them that. And then the network executives or show executives, whatever they were, came back and said that they didn't believe that. And basically, he said they didn't use the word blacklisted, but essentially said he wouldn't work for them ever again. And this was like the overarching network. He didn't say what network that was. I don't know who owned UPN back then. But it was a really big network, he said, and I was in my 30s. My career was going in a really upwards way, and that scared me half to death because I thought that would be the end of me. So he said I felt I had no choice, so I went back for cycle 9. And then they asked, well, why did you stay until cycle 18? And he said, for the same reason, pure fear. He thought if I quit at any point, I won't work again. He said in hindsight I wouldn't do that because I now know that, what did he say? I now know that they probably didn't have that much power or something to that effect. I'm not sure, but he said he wouldn't do that anymore, but he didn't know any better back then. And the one thing he always said about Tyra is, you don't leave Tyra. Tyra leaves you. So he did 10 more cycles after he wanted to quit. He did it until cycle 18. His role became a lot smaller. He had a lot less input. He said, and she wouldn't say a word to me unless the cameras were on. And then she was my best friend. And as soon as the cameras were off, we stopped talking. Now at the end, he said, in all these years, she's never publicly spoken about me. Like Tyra, whenever she has interviews, she has a list of questions that she doesn't want the interviewer to ask, and I'm always on that list. So when this documentary, Being Neutral, the interviewer asked her about me at the end, you can see that she's a little bit annoyed with the interviewer, and she was taken by surprise. And then she goes, no, I should call Jay. He said, this was recorded a year ago. My phone number never changed. She hasn't called me. And you know what? I'm pretty sure she won't. He said, I haven't spoken to Tyra outside of the camera since cycle 8. And And I don't think I will ever speak to Tyra in my life again. He said that I'm okay with that. I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of working through relationships. He said if I never speak to her again, that's fine with me. But he said back then he revered her. He would have literally done anything for her. And that's why I don't think he's so innocent in this whole thing. He took accountability for a lot of things, but he also did a lot and spoke to models in certain ways that he shouldn't have, because it's what she wanted him to do, and he would have done anything for her. He said, but I'm okay with never talking to her again. And he said the Tyra that we got in the doc, and this is the part that makes me sad, he said the Tyra we got to see in the documentary was her public persona, the person she wants to portray. He said, I know the real Tyra. I've seen her at her most vulnerable. I know things about her that I will never disclose to anyone. That, black woman who struggled so much to get to where she was, if she had shown up as that person and shown that vulnerability and owned up to a lot of the things that just weren't right, I think the audience would have reacted very differently to her. But she showed up with her armor and didn't take accountability for anything. And personally, I believe, this is not Jay, this is me. Personally, I believe if she hadn't taken part in the documentary, people would have given her some grief over copping out. But I think it would have been less bad for her than taking part in the way that she did, because she's getting canceled all over the internet right now. Not necessarily for the things that happened on Top Model, but for the fact that she didn't apologize for any of it. And that's kind of, I think, where I'm gonna leave it. I think it was a different time is a valid excuse for a lot of things. But again, I don't think that means you can't apologize for it now. And that's kind of what Nigel and Jay did. Also, Miss J had a stroke in 2002, in case you didn't watch the documentary, because nobody knew this. He was in a coma for 5 weeks, and he was in the hospital for a year and a half. Couldn't walk, couldn't talk, half of his body paralyzed. And I wondered why, right? The whole documentary, he spoke weird, and he looked like he aged way more than Jay, Mr. J Manuel. And I thought, was Miss J a lot older than him? I thought they were similar in age. It wasn't until the end of the documentary that they revealed he had a stroke, and I was like, oh, now that makes sense. J Manuel revealed in the interview that he can now get out of his wheelchair and take steps. He still can't walk properly, but he can take steps. Miss J said in the documentary, I can't walk yet, but I will be back. And Mr. J said he can now take steps, and trust me, if anyone is ever gonna walk again, it's Miss J. But Tyra never visited him in the hospital. Nigel and Jay both did. They seem to still be pretty close, if you look at the documentary. But she never did. And she's in New York a lot, ain't gonna be bothered. And Miss J said recently, she sent me a text that she wants to come see me. And Mr. J said, to this day, she still hasn't. And that is something I don't understand. I understand. Oh, another part actually is the firing of the two J's and Nigel. She claimed that was a decision of the network executives and that her and Ken had to deliver that news. The way she says, I cried myself to sleep that night. I was like, oh, that's such BS. She says, to this day, I don't think any of them believe that that was not our decision, but that was coming from above us. And Jay said in his interview with the network, and I know this from insiders, had a meeting with Tyra and Ken and talked about budget cuts being needed. He said if both of them had taken a pay cut, we would have all kept our jobs. But neither of them wanted to take a pay cut, and Tyra said, let's just get rid of the three of them because we were the three highest paid underneath them. So they could hire new people for a lot less money. Now he said the views tanked with 54% after we left. But sure, we were the ones who were bringing the viewers down. That was the excuse Tyra said the network used. But that wasn't the case at all. He said, and by the way, I don't blame her for making that decision. Good for her. She had to make a business decision. She decided she didn't want to make a pay cut. She'd rather let us go. He said, I'm not angry at that. That happens all the time in the industry. Good for her. But what made him angry, along with Nigel and Miss J, is that the agreement they all made is that they would have some time to create a joint press release and leave the show supposedly on their own terms and on good terms. And she decided to, he said there was a leak to page 6, which she made, that stated the three of them were fired by Tyra. He said she wanted to control the narrative and make sure her show was put in a good light because it was done for the betterment of the show. He said, and that's the only thing that pissed me off about that whole situation. He said, I wanted to leave after cycle 8. It was a relief for me to get fired. But we didn't get to do it on our own terms. She got to spin the narrative in her favor. And that's just who she is. So, let me guys know your thoughts. And constructive only, please, but do let me know if you were genuinely offended by some of the photo shoots that I wasn't, and